The mediator's pen froze in midair, and for a heartbeat, the room went utterly silent. My younger sister, Emma, was smiling that polished, confident smile she'd worn since the day she decided my life's work was hers to claim. "Claire," she said sweetly, "Dad always told me the company was meant for both of us." The mediator nodded, almost pitying me, as if I'd stolen something that was never truly mine. 42 years of sweat, lost weekends, sleepless nights reduced to a family promise. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears as Emma's lawyer slid a document across the table. "We're seeking 50% ownership," he said. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I just opened my briefcase, pulled out a single envelope, and set it on the table. "You might want to read this first," I said. And that was the moment everything changed. People like to think success happens overnight. Mine didn't. It started in 1983, in a tiny apartment above a pawn shop in Dallas, where I used to sketch furniture designs on my kitchen table between part-time jobs. I was 21, broke, and stubborn enough to believe I could build something beautiful. My father, Harold Harrison, was a contractor, practical, tough, a man who measured worth in calluses. One evening he handed me an envelope with a small smile. $10,000, he said. "It's not much, but it's a start. Build something of your own, Claire. Make it count." That was all I needed. With that loan, I bought secondhand drafting tools, rented a garage space, and founded Harrison Home Design. I worked 7 days a week, taking every small project I could find, repainting kitchens, designing cabinets, refitting old homes that nobody cared about. Slowly, the calls started coming, then referrals, then contracts. By the time I was 35, I had 12 employees and clients waiting months in advance. By 40, we were designing homes for CEOs and celebrities. My father used to walk through the showroom with quiet pride, running his hand over polished wood and saying, "You did this, kiddo." And Emma? My little sister was off chasing internships in Los Angeles, posting photos from rooftop parties while I was hauling lumber at midnight. She had big dreams, marketing, branding, a life of glamour. "You're wasting your talent in construction dust," she'd tell me. "You should hire me to make your company famous." I laughed back then. We weren't rivals, we were just different. Or so I thought. When Dad passed away in 2019, I handled everything: the funeral, Mom's medical bills, the estate. Emma came home for 3 days, gave a speech about family, then flew back to California. I didn't mind. I was used to carrying things alone. But 2 years later, out of nowhere, she called me. Her voice was soft but sharp. "Claire, we need to talk about the business." I smiled. "What about it?" She paused, then said words that made my stomach twist. "Dad always said Harrison Home Design was for both of us. I think it's time we made that official." I laughed then, a mistake I wouldn't make again, because that phone call was the start of everything that came after. 2 weeks after that call, a courier showed up at my office with a thick brown envelope. Inside was a 78-page lawsuit. Emma Harrison versus Claire Harrison ownership. Claim over Harrison Home Design, Incorporated. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. My own sister was suing me. Her attorney, a man named Daniel Price, claimed that our father had made a verbal promise that the business would belong to both of his daughters, as part of his legacy. The documents accused me of using family money, of excluding Emma from decisions, of profiting from a company intended to be jointly owned. I felt my hands shaking. I had receipts for every cent I'd ever invested, every contract I'd ever signed. But legal truth isn't always emotional truth, and Emma knew exactly which strings to pull. That night, I sat in my office long after everyone left, staring at the company logo I'd designed 40 years ago. My name, my dream. My lawyer, Sarah Klein, called the next morning. "I've read the claim," she said, calm but firm. "It's emotional manipulation disguised as a case. But it's dangerous, Claire. She's invoking what's called promissory estoppel. If a judge believes your father made a promise with legal intent, ownership records might not protect you. So she could actually win?" I asked, barely recognizing my voice. "It's possible. Not likely, but possible. We'll need everything: incorporation papers, tax records, business loans, emails from your father, anything proving his intent." For the next week, I barely slept. My office turned into a battlefield of boxes, contracts, letters, Old ledgers yellowed with time. Every page was a piece of my life, and I couldn't shake the thought that Emma wanted to erase it. Mom's nurse called me one evening. "Your sister just phoned asking about your mother's memory records. Do you know why?" My blood ran cold. Emma was already building her case, trying to rewrite history through our parents. By the end of that week, I'd gone from disbelief to anger. Not because of the money, but because my little sister, the girl I once protected from everything, had turned me into her opponent. I looked at the lawsuit again, bold letters at the top, Plaintiff Emma Harrison, and I whispered, "If you want to fight, Emma, you're going to get one." The first mediation session was held downtown, in one of those sterile corporate offices that smell faintly of coffee and polished floors. The sign on the door read, "Mediation Suite B." Funny how such a bland place could hold the ruins of 40 years of family. Emma arrived 10 minutes late, wearing a cream blazer and a smile that could cut glass. Her lawyer, Daniel Price, trailed behind her like a shadow. "Claire," she said softly, as if greeting a stranger. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." I wanted to laugh. My company, my life, my employees, and she called it not hard. The mediator, Linda Cho, a retired judge with calm eyes and a polite smile, began the session. "We're here to explore a resolution that respects both parties and honors your father's wishes." His wishes. That phrase made my skin crawl. Daniel slid a file across the table. "Our position is simple. Harold Harrison verbally promised that Harrison Home Design would belong equally to both his daughters. My client seeks recognition of her rightful 50%. Linda turned to me. "Miss Harrison, is that accurate?" I met Emma's gaze. "No. My father gave me a loan, not a legacy. I paid him back. Every cent." Emma tilted her head, eyes soft, voice sugar-sweet. "That's not how I remember it. Christmas 2016, Dad told me. Both my girls will share this company one day." Her voice trembled just enough to sound convincing. I clenched my hands under the table. That Christmas, Dad had been confused, mixing up names and stories. He'd already started losing pieces of himself, sometimes calling me Mary, his late sister. But the mediator didn't know that. And Daniel, the lawyer, smiled like a man watching a chess game he'd already won. Linda's pen moved slowly. "Miss Harrison, would you say your father's statement could be interpreted as an intention of shared ownership?" I bit back a laugh. "You can interpret anything if you twist it hard enough." "Please," Linda warned gently. "Let's keep this professional." Emma folded her hands. "I'm not trying to take from her," she said, feigning innocence. "I just want what's fair. What Dad promised. Fair." That word hit me harder than I expected. For years I'd been paying Mom's medical bills, handling Dad's care, keeping this company alive. And she was talking about fair. When the session ended, the mediator scheduled another round. Emma hugged me at the door, whispering, "I still love you, Claire. I just want equality." I pulled away, staring at her coldly. Equality doesn't mean erasing 40 years of my work. As she walked out, Daniel glanced back and smiled. That was the moment I knew this wasn't about family anymore. It was about ownership. The second mediation session was worse. By then, Emma had perfected her performance. The trembling voice, the wounded look, the story about Dad's dream of unity. Even the mediator, Linda, seemed charmed. When we sat down, Emma clasped her hands on the table like a saint. "Claire," she began softly, "this isn't about money. It's about what Dad wanted. About family." I almost laughed. Family? That word had become her favorite weapon. Linda leaned forward. "Claire, sometimes business ownership in families carries emotional meaning beyond paperwork. Don't you feel some obligation to honor your father's intent?" "My father's intent?" I said slowly. "He intended for me to work, to build. I did that. Alone." Daniel, her lawyer, interrupted. "Intent can exist without written proof. Courts often recognize verbal promises in family estates." Sarah, my lawyer, shot him a look. "Only when those promises are specific and legally binding, which yours aren't." The mediator scribbled something in her notes, probably that I was defensive. And maybe I was, because I could feel the walls closing in. Emma was playing the long game, emotion over evidence. And it was working. After 3 hours, the mediator suggested I consider a goodwill gesture. "Perhaps," she said gently, "offering your sister a minority share." 10, maybe 20%. I felt my stomach twist. You're suggesting I hand over part of my company to someone who's never worked a day for it? Linda's tone didn't change. It could help the family heal. I looked straight at Emma. Or destroy what's left of it. She didn't blink. You've always been selfish, Claire. You just hide it behind hard work. Something in me cracked. Selfish? I snapped. Who paid Mom's hospital bills for the last 4 years? Who sold their house to cover Dad's care when his insurance ran out? You didn't even visit him at the end? Enough, Linda said sharply. This is not productive. No, it was honest. Afterward, Sarah and I rode the elevator down in silence. My reflection in the mirrored wall looked older, heavier. She's getting sympathy, Sarah said finally. The mediator's leaning her way. If this goes to trial, it's still winnable, but mediation might end badly. So what do we do? Sarah looked at me. Find proof. Anything that shows your father intended the business to be yours alone. That night I went home and pulled out the old lockbox Dad had left me after he passed. Inside were tax files, letters, and a sealed envelope labeled Claire, 2015. My hands trembled as I tore it open. The first line read, I'm proud of what you've built, Claire. Harrison Home Design is yours alone. I stopped breathing. In that moment, I realized the truth I needed had been sitting in my hands all along. I sat at my kitchen table long after midnight, the letter trembling in my hands. Dad's handwriting was messy but unmistakable slanted lines, uneven spacing, the ink smudged where his hand had pressed too hard. I'm proud of what you've built, Claire. Harrison Home Design is yours alone. You took a small loan and turned it into something I could never have imagined. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. You earned every inch of it. Love, Dad. June 2015. June 2015, 4 years before his diagnosis. Before the confusion. Before the fading memories. Back when his mind was sharp as ever. I reread it over and over until the words blurred. Yours alone. Those 2 words felt like air after drowning. Not because I wanted to destroy Emma's claim, but because, for the first time, I knew I wasn't crazy. Dad had known the truth. When I showed Sarah the next morning, she exhaled slowly, scanning the letter. This is solid, Claire. It's dated, signed, and written before his dementia. It's a direct statement of ownership. If we present this in mediation, her case collapses. But will they believe it? Sarah smiled faintly. Oh, they'll believe it. And if they don't, the medical records will make them. I blinked. Medical records? Your father's doctor, he diagnosed him in late 2019. If we can get documentation showing his cognitive decline started after this letter, then every promise Emma claims happened after that becomes invalid. I felt a shiver of hope. Then that means, it means, Sarah said. Your sister built her entire argument on words spoken by a man no longer legally capable of making them. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to breathe. I spent the next week gathering everything. The letter, old emails from Dad, bank transfers showing I'd repaid the $10,000 loan, even his medical reports. Each page felt like a weapon forged from patience and pain. The night before the final mediation, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the quiet halls of my office, the smell of sawdust and paint, the hum of machines cooling down. Every corner whispered the same truth. I built this. But a small voice in my chest still whispered fear. What if Emma didn't care about the truth anymore? What if she just wanted to hurt me? At 2 a.m., I sat in Dad's old office chair, the one I'd kept after he passed. I placed the letter on his desk, tracing his handwriting with my fingers. Dad, I whispered. You always said the hardest fights aren't with strangers, they're with family. I didn't want this fight. But I'm not letting her take what I bled for. When morning came, I wore my best black suit not for intimidation, but for armor. I slipped the letter into a white envelope, tucked it inside my briefcase, and drove downtown. Emma could have her stories, her lawyer, her sympathy. I had the truth. And tomorrow, she'd finally see it. The morning of the final mediation felt colder than usual. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. 40 years of my life all reduced to one room, one conversation, one letter. When I walked into the building, Emma was already there, radiant in her white suit, sipping coffee like she owned the world. Her lawyer, Daniel, nodded politely. The mediator, Linda, gave me that rehearsed smile I'd come to hate, calm, neutral, detached. "Let's begin," Linda said, her voice steady. "This is our third and final session. My hope is that we can reach an agreement before this proceeds to trial." Emma leaned forward, resting her manicured hands on the table. "I'm not asking for anything unreasonable," she said smoothly. "Just what my father intended, a fair 50%. Her tone was calm, but the challenge underneath it was sharp enough to cut glass. Sarah, my lawyer, interjected. "Your father's intent is not a legal claim, Miss Harrison. Without proof." Emma interrupted. "Proof? I was there. Christmas 2017. Dad told me. Emma, don't worry. The business will be yours too." He said it more than once. I stared at her, trying to find the sister I used to know in that polished stranger. "You mean the same Christmas he forgot where he was halfway through dinner? When he asked me if I'd finished high school?" Emma's face went pale. "He had good days and bad days." "Exactly," I said, my voice steady. "And you're building your case on the bad ones." "Enough," Linda said sharply. "Let's keep this professional." Daniel cleared his throat. "Regardless of your client's tone, Miss Klein, the fact remains there's credible evidence of Mr. Harrison's verbal intent. He repeated this promise multiple times." Sarah smiled thinly. "Then, let's talk about evidence." She reached into her bag and pulled out a sealed envelope. "Claire, would you like to present what we discussed?" My hands didn't shake this time. I placed the envelope in front of me and slid it across the table. Emma frowned. "What is this?" "The truth," I said. Sarah unfolded the letter and began to read aloud. "I'm proud of what you've built, Claire. Harrison Home Design is yours alone. You took my small loan and turned it into something incredible. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Harold Harrison, June 2015. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Linda stopped writing. Daniel's mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. "This was written 4 years before his dementia diagnosis," Sarah continued. "We've also obtained his medical records, confirming cognitive decline began in late 2019. Every conversation Emma references occurred after that date." Emma blinked rapidly, color draining from her face. You went through his medical records?" I nodded. "I did, because you forced me to." Linda looked at Emma, then at me. "Miss Harrison, this letter changes the context entirely. It shows your father viewed the business as Claire's property, not a shared family asset." Daniel tried to recover. "A single letter doesn't negate years of expressed intent." Sarah cut him off. "Intent expressed by a man medically documented as cognitively impaired." The mediator leaned back, sighing. "Mr. Price, your client's claim may no longer have a legal basis. Continuing could expose her to liability for costs." Emma's eyes glistened. "So that's it? You get everything, and I get nothing?" I took a slow breath. "You were never supposed to get nothing, Emma. You were supposed to build your own life like Dad wanted. Instead, you tried to take mine." Her voice cracked. "You think you're better than me." "No," I said quietly. "I think I was just willing to work harder." For a long moment, no one spoke. The ticking of the wall clock filled the silence like a drumbeat. Finally, Daniel whispered to her, "We should withdraw." Emma turned toward him, then back to me, trembling. "You always win, don't you, Claire? You always have to be right." "This wasn't about being right," I said. "It was about being honest. There's a difference." Her chair scraped loudly against the floor as she stood. "You can keep your business," she spat, "but don't expect to keep your family." I looked her straight in the eyes. "You made sure of that when you filed the lawsuit." She left before anyone could stop her. The door slammed behind her, leaving the faint echo of perfume and anger in the air. Linda looked at me, her voice soft now. "I think that concludes our session." Sarah exhaled, shoulders relaxing for the first time in months. That letter saved everything. But as I sat there, staring at the empty chair across the table, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss, quiet, inevitable, and irreversible. Because the truth had protected my business. But it had also broken my sister beyond repair. I won. At least, that's what everyone kept telling me. The legal claim was withdrawn that same afternoon. Daniel sent a short, formal statement, acknowledging that new evidence had rendered further proceedings unnecessary. Sarah congratulated me over dinner. "You did it, Claire. You saved everything." But that night, sitting alone in my office, I didn't feel victorious. The letter, Dad's letter, sat framed on my desk now. But instead of pride, all I felt was a dull ache in my chest. Because in proving the truth, I had lost something else: my sister. Emma didn't call. She didn't text. Weeks passed. The holidays came and went. Our mother, still in her care facility, kept asking why Emma never visited anymore. I didn't have the heart to tell her. One morning, about a month after the mediation, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. Claire? It was Emma. Her voice was thin, tired. I just wanted to say, "I'm sorry." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The sound of her voice brought back everything: the laughter, the fights, the Christmas mornings we spent helping Dad hang lights on the porch. "I didn't know about the letter," she said softly. "If I had, I don't think I would have done any of it. I felt like you got everything, and I got left behind." I was angry. "You could have just told me that," I whispered. "I didn't think you'd listen," she said, voice cracking. "You always sounded so sure of yourself. I thought I had to fight to matter." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Emma, you always mattered. You're my sister. But you can't build your worth by tearing mine down." There was silence. Then she whispered, "I know." Before she hung up, she said something that stayed with me. "Dad was proud of you, Claire. I was just too jealous to see it." When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at the framed letter on my desk. I'd fought to keep what I built, and I had, but the cost was heavier than any settlement. Victory, I realized, doesn't always feel like winning. Sometimes, it feels like standing in the wreckage of something you loved, trying to decide whether to rebuild or to just remember. It's been a year since that day in the mediation room, the day I laid down a single envelope and watched my sister's claim, and our bond, crumble in silence. Harrison Home Design is still mine. Stronger, even. We've expanded into 2 new cities, hired 20 more people, and hit our first $7 million valuation. From the outside, everything looks perfect. But success doesn't feel the same anymore. Sometimes I catch myself staring at the letter framed above my desk. Dad's words, steady and clear: "It's yours alone. You earned every inch of it." I used to think that line meant ownership. Now I think it meant responsibility. The responsibility to protect what I built, but also to protect the people I love, even when they're the ones who hurt me. Emma and I started speaking again a few months ago. She showed up at Mom's birthday with flowers, nervous, awkward, but there. We talked for hours afterward about Dad, about our mistakes, about how envy can twist love until it looks like hate. She told me she was in therapy. She's starting her own small design consultancy now, nothing like mine, but hers. And when she said that, something inside me loosened. Because maybe that's what Dad really wanted all along. Not equality, but independence. Last week, I invited Emma to visit my studio. She walked through the space quietly, touching the tables, the samples, the sketches pinned to the walls. "This isn't just a business," she said softly. "It's your whole life." I smiled. "It's a part of it. But I'm ready to make room for more." We stood there for a long moment, 2 sisters who had finally stopped trying to compete and had started learning how to coexist. When she left, I looked around my office at the sunlight cutting through the glass, the hum of machines, the laughter of my team, and I realized something simple and true. You can rebuild a business after it's attacked. You can even rebuild trust after it's shattered, but only if you decide the past doesn't get to own you anymore. Dad's letter ends with the words, "Make it count." And for the first time in years, I finally feel like I am.